show. I'm Pippa Vosper. This is my gorgeous co-host, Michael Evans. And tonight, the panel and I will be discussing bullying. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. It's a phrase we all know, but it's actually not true. Words can hurt us. They can cause depression, anxiety, and in extreme cases, suicide. We're going to be discussing tonight the many levels of bullying and how it affects us all, both men and women. Trisha. Can I just start by introducing Trisha, who's in here from New York this evening? Woo! We're going to go through our guests and tell us all a bit about ourselves. Trisha, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, gosh. Since I'm 62 years of age, there's quite a lot to tell. But basically, I was born in Britain to a West Indian mother. I didn't know who my father was until fairly recently, but at the time I thought it was a white man. And being brought up in Britain in those days as a child of colour was, I went through some pretty horrific experiences, which we'll talk about later. So I'm a journalist, I'm a producer, I'm a mental health activist. I've been a mental health advisor to the Australian government. I sit on the World Psychiatric Association. I'm a patron of Mind, and with my daughter, Time for Change organisation.
Samantha, can you introduce yourself and tell us about you?
Of course, how can I go after Trisha? I mean, absolute legends. I like to call myself a bit of a doughboy because I wear many hats. So I am a former teacher, quit my job, moved to London, didn't have a job to come to, but I worked in the charity sector. I was a trustee and I was like, I really want to do more charity work. Then I went to a house party and someone said, do you want to act? I said, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind, as you do. And I did a film and I won an award in LA and I got an agent and I suppose the rest is history. But where I am right now, I do a bit of acting, I do presenting, I work on the radio, but my main kind of passion at the moment is disability rights activist. I am a wheelchair user and I'm proud to have a disability, and I've recognised that the disability community are really people that just aren't listened to, and I'm a northern lass, so I'm loud. So
you got a big mouth.
So I've got a big mouth. So if anyone's going to listen to someone, it's me. Yay. And so I'm fighting the corner for all those who maybe aren't as loud as I am. So yeah.
Rosie, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a member here at the NED, and I've worked in the City of London for about 20 years now. I've been a Chief Compliance Officer in many banks and trading houses, and I suppose it's fantastic to be here as part of this panel to talk a little bit about those experiences.
Thank you very much. And Cheska, we all know who you are. Explain who you are and why you're here.
So I'm Cheska Hull. I used to be on a reality show called Made in Chelsea when it first originally started for about 4.5 years. And then I suddenly left and I quit the whole thing and moved down to Devon, where I now live with my 2-year-old son. I'm now training to be a vet pharmacist, so my life is completely different. And it's the best thing I ever did, moving away, because I did struggle, which I'm sure we will talk about.
Yes.
But yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And Emily, a seasoned journalist, can you tell us about yourself?
I've been a journalist for nearly 20 years, 10 of those at Grazia magazine, where I was an editor. I've worked on national newspapers and in TV as well. So I'm here tonight.
You've done a lot of articles on bullying,
yes.
I've read.
Yes, yes. Well, it's something that's changed a lot in the sort of the media landscape in the last couple of decades, and how we treat it, how we approach it, how newspapers have potentially been responsible for it and are still responsible for it. I mean, proud to say, actually, at Grazia magazine, we were, I don't think we were ever responsible for bullying, but, you know, the sort of celebrity gossip culture that we reported on has shifted a lot. So there's a lot to talk about, I think.
Well, we're enjoying having you here. And Paola?
I would define myself as a warrior because I come from...
I love it.
I come from Italy, the most patriarchal society in Europe, unfortunately. And I experienced in my childhood domestic violence, so I think maybe this is also kind kind of a bullying, maybe the
It's a
most horrible
huge
because-
bullying issue.
And I discovered my passion, my mission in life to be an activist for women's rights.
Amazing.
And meanwhile, I made myself as an entrepreneur. So I'm a self-made entrepreneur, and in Italy and now here in London, because we have clients worldwide. I'm an author. I published this book, Saving the World, about women's rights. And now I am the host of Unleash the Game Changers. That is a YouTube show all about game changers.
Which we should all be watching. Thank you, Paola. It all starts in childhood. Most of it starts in childhood. We can experience bullying later in life, but I think as most people I've spoken to experience childhood bullying. And Trisha, I know in your book you've explained and been very vocal about your own childhood and how you experienced extreme levels of bullying. You were beaten every day. You know, you experienced racial discrimination at school. You dealt with it in the home, I believe, so there was no escape. I mean, if you're happy to be open with us as you were in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realise it at the time, but the person I called Dad, the white man I called Dad, wasn't actually my dad. I now, I hasten to say, have a fairly good relationship with him, but back then I never felt I fit in. I had 3 younger sisters who looked very, very different from me, very, very light in complexion.
And this white man at home was their father?
Yeah, and I thought I was told he was my dad as well.
Right.
Now, in this day and age, people would laugh, but in the early 60s, there were very few mixed race families that people can compare with. So his way of dealing with discipline, if you like, was physicality. And I mean, that was a huge issue in my life, that I equated love with if you're wrong, being beaten. And that led to me having relationships up until very, very recently, where I would either be physically controlled or much later, psychologically, if you like,
Isn't that
controlled.
funny how it can come and you believe this is your path and this is what normality
Well,
is?
you don't know any different. You don't know any different. I think the most invasive bullying comes with, you know, this person loves me, but they're going to hit me. This person's my friend, but she's calling me a bitch. So you think, but they love me, so I must be that. You know, if it's easier to deal with people who are outright enemies from the start.
In childhood, for instance, I mean, I went through bullying. And in childhood, you're conditioned to think about your life and where am I going? And then all of a sudden, you're bullied and told that this is where you are. So there's so many layers.
I had a white cousin, and my aunt at the time taught at Royal Sandringham. She taught the children of, you know, who worked on the royal estate. And so she took my 2 younger sisters to that little school, and my next sister down and myself went to the village school. Well, Amanda, my cousin, would come with us. We'd walk up to the school, and we would hear, and I'll use it, as we came. And we'd come up, and every day we had to walk through. The kids would form a welcoming committee either side of the gate and just punch and hit and kick. And Amanda, and I understand this now, would run around to the back and stand. She never cheered, but she had to survive herself.
So it was just you that was being beaten
Myself
at this
and
point,
my half-sister, beaten like this. And there was one girl, and I would so love to find her. Her name was Julie. She had long, white, blonde hair, long, and she'd come from East End of London, and she used to jump in with us and say, "I'll fight with you, I'll fight with you."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, why would
Trisha,
you do
let's
that?
make it something. I'm not even joking. Let's find Julie.
I'd love to find Julie.
Let's find Julie.
Every day, this kid would jump in. But, you know, the teachers...
Trisha, we're going to find Julie. I'm not joking.
The thing is, though, I completely relate to that because I had the same kind of, like, situation at school. But, like, Samantha, I mean, how was it for you? I mean, you must have been through a hell of a lot more than anyone sitting here, right?
Well, everything's relative, isn't it, I suppose? And I think as someone with a disability, so I've got a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta. Don't ask me how to spell it because I can't. But it's more commonly known as brittle bone condition. And when I was actually born, none of my parents had the condition. My sister is non-disabled, but I was born and I was then rushed away to a different hospital. My parents were asked to pray for me. And there's something in the community called the medical model of disability, and it's this whole negative attitude towards disability. And you see this quite often when someone has a child with Down syndrome. The first words that a mother hears is, "I'm so sorry, your child has Down syndrome."
So automatically, you're on a downward rise,
exactly.
right?
I mean, I would say I was about 5, 6, and I loved my life. I was quite cocky. I was quite out there. I thought I was fabulous and the bee's knees. And it was only when I started to interact with wider society that I was told I was wrong. I was, not supposed to be loved.
At what point did this happen? When did you notice, as a child, I am different? Like, these kids are saying things to me that are not positive, and it makes you feel uncomfortable?
I would say I went to infant school, and my infant school, I was definitely the only disabled one in the school.
But were they accepting?
Do you know, they were, and this is quite telling of society as a whole. At primary school, I remember I used to have a power wheelchair, and I was on the grass, and they all picked daisies. All my school class picked daisies when I joined, and they all put the daisies on my wheelchair, and I loved it. And then I went to high school. Unfortunately, my father passed away suddenly. We were moving to New Zealand. Then he died, and it was all like, oh my goodness, world turned upside down. So I had to go to a high school. The high school I wanted to go to with all my peers turned around and said, no, we're not having someone in a wheelchair. And that was back in the day when they were allowed to discriminate. So I went to a completely different high school. I knew nobody.
What was this, late 80s?
Yeah, early 90s. It's telling my age. But no, I then went to a different school, didn't know anyone, and I was
And
the girl on the wheelchair.
This was a state school with able-bodied...
Non-disabled people, yeah. I mean, and then I was the disabled one. So primary school, I was Sam. I had these awful Benetton multicoloured glasses. Remember Benetton? And, long pigtails. And that's how someone would describe me. As soon as I went to high school, I was the girl in the wheelchair.
Right.
And I received horrendous bullying from that point.
And it was at this point that everything changed for you, and then the bullying started?
Most definitely.
Do you think, interestingly, like looking at that, do you blame it on the fact that you changed schools and then as new people, or do you think that, I'm talking from experience, from primary school to secondary school, there's a huge difference?
It was probably a combination of everything. I think if I were to would have gone to the school that I knew everyone, I would have, there would have been people there that maybe thought, don't really like Sam, but not necessarily because she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I think I was
because you were gobby.
Because I was gobby. Let's face it, no one likes that. But no, I definitely feel as though the bullying started to intensify, and that manifested in me kind of being sick. I was always sick, and having a condition with brittle bones, so I've broken about 200 bones in my life. Yeah. I would be like, oh mummy, I think I've cracked a rib today. So I was off, and that definitely impacted my studies. Completely.
But then it rolls on, doesn't it, to now, if we're talking about where we are today. Social media bullying.
Yes.
I know, Cheska, you've had a lot of abuse online and in the media, and is this what made you decide, you know what, enough is enough? You leaving a prime-time television show in its prime, in your prime, so we all think on television, that's a really bold step that most people wouldn't take.
Yeah, it was hard, and I think it was scary kind of thinking, what am I going to do after this?
Yes, because that was
it
your life.
My life, and it was everything.
Yeah.
And thank God it was the best thing I did, because I honestly don't know if I'd be here today if I hadn't have gone. It was that bad.
It was horrific.
So what kind of things were happening? People were loving everyone else on the show and getting at you, or just you couldn't, some others were getting bullied, but you personally felt it was too much for you, which I would
It depends. I mean, the social media side, obviously you get people commenting on everything from your looks to that, and a lot of us here have had that. That was one thing that I kind of felt like I almost had to accept because I'd signed that contract. Sure. But then I had a stalker at one point who threatened to kill me and would post photos of knives, like big knives and things like that. And at the time, because this is going back sort of 4 or 5 years ago, even the police didn't know what to do with it. I think it's probably quite different now because...
Do you really think it is now?
I think it's better now. There are perhaps even laws and they're more... But I remember at the time, and I was lucky that Channel 4 and NBC were brilliant and they did help me with it, but no one really knew what to do because it was so early on. You know, Made in Chelsea and Towie kind of... We started, even we didn't know what we were doing, the producers didn't know, it was a very new genre. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, which I found really hard, was that it wasn't just the social media. Like, I had certain cast members that I worked with, and I don't think now this would happen, but 5 years ago it did. I remember filming one day and there was an argument, as it always happens, and it's all drummed up. And one of the cast members called me a fat cow.
Male or female?
A girl.
Yep.
And it was obviously upsetting when it happened, because it was a nasty bullying thing. No, on camera. She said, you know, you're just a
Okay, and it was for effect, or you knew it was for real?
I did. She said it because that's how she felt, and she felt that she wanted to call me that.
She knew that would hurt you.
And the producers made a decision to air that. Now, I think nowadays they probably wouldn't, because I went through that happening as it happened. I then had to wait 6 weeks for it to be aired, and then having to deal with, you know, hundreds and thousands of people laughing about that and calling me that. And I've even said since then, I've been, even this year on Instagram, a cable network have said, oh, look at, these are the biggest put downs on reality TV.
And they made it into a sport,
Yeah,
right?
and how funny that she got, and I just think, you know, I'm over that, and I'm fine about that now. I've dealt with that, and I look back on that as a very different part of my life. But the fact that people still bring that up, and that they would feature someone being bullied on TV
because it's the producer there has gone, is a bully. Basically, and they've gone, how can we make a TV show that's going to get airtime and people talking by being mean about somebody else, which is so effed up.
In terms of racism and bullying within that sector, like, can you give us some insight on that?
It's funny because I've had to revisit all of this by talking about Meghan Markle. People think that bullying, racial bullying, is just using the N-word. I was the first black person, I made history in Australia as the first black person ever to be on television in 1988, their bicentennial. I've never seen I genuinely never really saw my colour, because I went from an international school. After that bullying as a primary school, I went to a school in Surrey where it was all pilots and wealth. When it comes to money, colour goes. And then I went and worked in the Middle East where everyone was every colour. In Australia, I was black person number 365 after Sir Galford Sobers. They gave us numbers. They gave us numbers. They gave us numbers. 1985, they gave you numbers. Congratulations, you are black person number 365. And I said, who was 364? They said, Sir Garfield Sobers, the cricket player.
But you went there as in a professional capacity. You didn't go there as, like, I'm going to relocate my life.
No, I went there as a twit. I married my first husband. In Australia, when people could come up to my face, and as I was holding my daughter, and a man came up, walked up to me in a very posh part of Sydney, and I thought he was going to say, what a nice baby, and I was holding my daughter, who's now 30, she must have been about 3. He came right up to me and smiled, and I smiled back at him, and he spat in my face. So, you know, I kind of, from my era at this age, I'm not saying I'm blasé.
But you've seen it all.
Yeah, when people start saying, oh, they looked at me funny, I say, oh, get a life.
You haven't dealt with anything. So also, I mean, I was talking to Paola earlier about Paola growing up as, she won't say this, I will say it, as a very attractive female in Italy, and the industries that you worked in, you felt not a level of racial discrimination, but a lot of sexism.
After my master's degree, I couldn't find a job because I was already a mother of 2 young kids. So I sent my CV to, I think, almost 2,000 companies, and no one called me back.
Do you think this was because you've been out of work for a while, or we are directing it at you were female?
Because I was a mother.
Was it?
Unfortunately, they don't hire mothers.
So this is a form of bullying in the sense of you're being discriminated against and effectively bullied from a workplace, although it's not verbal or physical at this point, because you're a woman and a mother.
Absolutely. So after that, my professor at my master business school, he asked me to join the political campaign of the former Prime Minister, Prodi. I accepted. I was very happy and enthusiastic, even though I wasn't paid. I was paid 200 euros for the first 4 months.
Right.
And then stopped paying me, even though other part of the members of the
And
crew
it's
were
funny
paid.
what we accept at the time. I've done many unpaid jobs when I started out in fashion, and I look back at that time now and I say, why didn't I speak up and say I'm worth money? Like, you all, it's crazy what we do.
Yeah, no,
But sorry.
actually, I also tried to speak up at some point because I was like, it's unfair, you know, my colleagues, all young like me, you know, they're
Men?
getting paid. Yeah, the majority of them that were men. I was like, I would say the only female in my position because my professor was very good with me. He gave me a lot of responsibilities. So I was kind of the head of the think tank they created in favor of the president
Amazing.
at the time. So it was great. I was learning so much. So I was really passionate about politics.
But you weren't getting paid, and did you find that there was a level of outright bullying happening to you at this point, or it was more underlying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The head of the campaign, who had the money in his hands, he said clearly to me, no, I mean, there's no money now, do whatever you want. So I just collected all my stuff and I said, okay, fine, I will keep working only for my professor, not for you, so you won't, you know, ask me anything. And I will work from home, so at least I will see my children, because, you know, it's very consuming.
But what were there words he gave to you that you think back now that would never be acceptable? I could report him now, or was it just like unspoken, but you knew what was happening?
Yeah, now it would be better. Definitely now I could report him.
Really?
At the time.
See, that's the thing. There are Rosie, you would know this as well, working in the city for many years, 20 years, top of your game, senior management. I mean, of course, there are HR in place, but how effective are they really? And I mean, the thing is, what I've always thought about, I've never worked in a senior management sort of corporate position, but surely from stories I've heard and what you've experienced, are people afraid to speak up? If you're getting bullied in a high-profile city job, are you then scared you're never going to work again in the city if you actually speak up about being bullied?
And how do you report it as the senior person in that role?
And it's a really, really interesting thing. And if we look at the journey that the city's been on over the last 2 decades, particularly with a couple of financial crises under our belt, one of the key things that the government has looked at and what they've talked about is at the heart of all of these issues and crises has been bad conduct, which has led to poor culture.
Right.
To the point where, yeah, exactly. But if you look at some of the scandals that have happened across banks as well, it has been people not behaving in an appropriate manner.
And what would you say by not appropriate at this point?
Well,
so we get a better understanding.
So a really good way to think about it. There's a lady called Megan Butler, who is the FCA's head of enforcement, I believe she is now, and she describes it as non-financial misconduct. So it could be bullying, could be sexual harassment, and it talks to some of the rules that the city has in place and some new initiatives that they've done over the last 3 or 4 years to really hammer this message home.
And is it rife, those things you mentioned?
I think it was previously. I think it's much better now. And to the question that you asked, I think probably somebody 20 years ago might have felt reluctant about speaking up. Now, and certainly as a compliance officer, one of the things that we train people on, there is never a bad question to ask.
Right.
Always raise your hand. And actually enshrined in some of our legal acts, there's a concept of whistleblowing. And if you blow the whistle on bad conduct, you are protected under law. And we saw that recently with
Are they? Like, how much are they? Like, how do they feel when they come straight to you? Okay, I'm going to blow the whistle.
And are they still frightened that they won't work again?
I think they probably
What's the
are.
journey? Like, as soon as they come to you, I'm blowing the whistle. Like, where's the protection?
So they go through various stages of investigation. They will talk to various people that may or may not have observed any of the behaviour. There'll also be more, if you like, technologically forensic investigations, so pulling of emails, pulling of voice recordings, etc., and that will be analysed by independent functions. So like a function that I would run, which would be deemed an independent control function, because we are agnostic and, you know, have to look at these things. And I think to a point that was made earlier, because finance is such a deeply and heavily regulated sector, people do feel that they can talk about it. However, what I would say about anything and getting engaged in any of those processes, it takes a very brave individual to do it, not because they're worried about losing their job, but because the scrutiny is so very intense.
You still think it is a major thing for someone to step forward, even though there's all of this structure in place, unlike you three, and say, this is happening to me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a court trial.
To a degree, but also then it's also, is that behaviour truly real, and it does make people really think about, is this just a disagreement that I have with this individual, or is it truly bullying? Or is it truly something? Exactly. Or is it? Absolutely. But it comes to a point I think you made earlier, Trisha, about the more subtle and insidious type bullying, which people don't even know that they're exposed to until it's too late.
What do you mean?
You know, so there's a concept called mobbing, where you have gaslighting and things like that, where people will start to be subject to this weird, slightly claustrophobic, negative narrative that they don't know where it's come from, even though they're doing their job really well, but they just bring a diversity of thought to the generic operating rhythm, and it's very hard to put your finger on what that is and why does it matter.
Which changes your rhythm, which then changes your mood, which changes your outcome, which changes your output.
And I think that happens in every industry.
And I realise I'm in a very, I've worked my own bottom off to get there, don't get me wrong, but I'm in a very privileged position as a disabled person, as a white woman. I'm very privileged to be there, but I do not call out when I am facing discrimination, ableism, because I'm like, oh my goodness, shut up, Samantha, because you might not get invited back.
You blew the whistle, like I joked and people laughed. You'll never work in this town again. It is true. You will not get a job. You will not get a job with another newspaper.
In fashion, politics,
press,
I'm sure in
print.
city. I'm sure. But Samantha, I'm going to actually ask you quite a personal question. Not too terrible, but. Or in the online world, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you do look different to many people out there, right?
Look fabulous.
Fabulous, darling. However, when you're putting yourself out there and you receive a negative comment, how do you deal with it?
So, I had mega stardom when I appeared in a well-known chocolate commercial, and that was more successful than I ever thought, and they totally underpaid me, but that's another... I know, right? There's other chocolate, varieties that you can eat. But that was a shock to me, and all of a sudden, I kind of was out there on social media, really invested in my platforms, and I got a tremendous amount of abuse. And it wasn't abuse about me, my performance as an actress, etc. It was specifically about my disability. I got that midget freak is making me want to throw, tagging me in. Real humans walk on legs. I never want to eat chocolate again. What is that? And it affected the work that I received afterwards, because obviously this is like a real pivotal time for me as a performer, as an actor, as a broadcaster.
On national television,
I was doing daytime televisions, and I actually started to, again, like I was in high school when I was bullied, saying to my agent, I'm not very well, I can't go on Victoria Derbyshire. I can't do this show because I didn't want to get the abuse. Now,
and then,
I sold my story to the HuffPost about being bullied, and I got such an amazing response from a lot of young people, a lot of disabled people, and they were like, thank you for sharing. And I was like, there you go. So,
and then was this the point that you kind of went, F it, I am me,
I did.
I'm going out?
I did. You know, I think genuinely, I think I'm amazing. I actually genuinely love myself. I love the fact that I've got a disability, that this is a positive thing. It's only other people that see it as a negative thing. I would never change if I were to be reborn, I'd be reborn exactly the same way. So I genuinely would.
I would like to follow on with sort of personal stories. And Emily, you and I have spoken about this. And, the environment that you work in, the bullying nature, is that another thing that we're facing?
It's just so interesting, isn't it? You're always going to get sort of jealousy and all those sort of human emotions when humans come together and are put in a workplace or an environment where competitiveness is rife and what have you. And I've certainly experienced it and witnessed it. And
recently, you and I, Emily takes us out of situations which I admire greatly when things don't go right for you, which I love. Through circumstances, and you recently experienced a level of bullying, and you rightly, like Cheska did, took yourself out. And you were like, I'm not going to have this affect my life in this way.
I was too old and too experienced and had been too around the block for such a long, I was just like, I'm not accepting this. And actually, It's a bit, I don't know how much I can say really, but I spoke to the top person at this workplace and said,
Did they
look,
accept that you were being bullied?
It's a funny situation because it was a combination. Pardon? Well, it was a combination of, I felt, it was actually someone below me who was being quite disrespectful and deliberately trying to...
Undermine you.
Undermine me, exactly.
Get above you.
Yeah. There was a sense, if you're in this job, then it's only one of us can be in this job. There's only room for one of us.
You get that with women
So
of
if
colour. I've been told, well, we've already hired a black person, we don't need you.
We have this thing. I'm going to take it back a bit. I'm going to get a little bit more serious. We're all having, yes, serious discussions, but on a light note. But one thing I really wanted to cover this evening, and Trisha, I am going to bring it back to you because you've been so vocal about this, and it's bullying, physical and emotional, within relationships.
People see women in those situations as poor, uneducated. I would suggest to you, it often is women who are the major wage earners, who have all the... because the men feel they need to assert their power because they don't have financial power. And that's when I've been at in my most dangerous situations, when I have been the earner, the mother and everything else. I am a threat. I will be taken down.
Then we're talking about friend relationships and the damage that often friend relationships can cause. I mean, I'm sure all of us have I've had a very negative experience. I remember belittling. And then I realised I was picking her up all the time in my car. I was driving her around. I was buying her groceries and dropping it off to her house. What? Like, this is not that long ago. It's like 4 or 5 years ago, and I think I am a very independent, strong... And suddenly this person had manipulated me to the point where bullying, where she was saying, oh, you haven't got your nails like that, have you? Oh, why are you doing... Oh, God, why are you wearing that? And, oh, can you just pick up my groceries and drive them over? And it's a 20-minute drive, and I would... Suddenly I was like... What? And I was leaving my house at 6 o'clock with a young son and my husband and saying, oh, I'm going out with so-and-so. But picking her up and driving her to her event, being her monkey, and then driving her home. And it dawned on me months later that this was really happening to me. You know, like manipulative bullying, you know.
It's control.
Oh, I got rid. Oh, I got rid. But the point was is that you never think it's going to happen to you. And then you're suddenly into it and you're like, why am I leaving my son and my lovely husband and getting someone's groceries?
It's obviously when you're often when you're vulnerable, or the people who have tendencies to bully can prey on you and see that weakness, and then relationships are established, and suddenly you find yourself doing what you say.
I know, I'm a pleaser. I've always had it with boyfriends.
But don't you think trying to please people is a fear of...
Rejection.
Rejection.
Not just rejection.
Can I put it to the panel, actually? What's the most powerful emotion in the entire world? What do we all think that is?
Shame. If you are ashamed of who you are, what you are, and that is why bullying is so toxic, because it ignites in us shame.
But this is lack of self-love as well. Exactly. So when he was talking about emotion, I actually thought about responding in a positive way. Like, for me, the most powerful is self-love. So if you love yourself, this can't happen because you're not ashamed. So that's the key, I think, in order to fight bullying.
A lot of disabled people feel like burden, and going back to the friendship, I've had many toxic relationships because I felt like, friendships, because I've felt like a burden, so I've overcompensated by allowing people to take advantage, and that is...
And did you find they did?
Yeah, a few did, but this is this internalised, feeling of being a burden.
Yeah.
My experiences were in childhood, and I think that as a child being tortured by another child, they're a child, and as an adult you forgive them because in an adult frame of mind potentially they're not that person. So that was a different experience. And do you know what? As a psychologist said to me, they said, Michael, do you know you don't get bullied in the playground, you get bullied at home. I said, what? Yes, and it's about either going like this or, excuse me, no. And I didn't have either of those things, so yes, it did get worse. So yes, it did come. But your parents are also, it's the first time they're parents. It's not their fault either. It's just a matter of fact, it's society, it's things, and it's looking at the weaker thing, the weaker person. I was the weakest link. I was the weakest link, and I needed to credify it. And I came to London and I made a credit of myself, but then I turned it around and then I let it go.
And just before we end, I would like to ask all of you what life advice you would give to people now who are going through similar things, that are watching this and with us here tonight and viewing the show. Michael, you've said you forgive.
Yeah, I think it's the first thing you have to do.
It's amazing. Samantha, what would you say?
Very cliche, but life is short, and do you know what? As a disabled woman, with everyone telling me that I shouldn't, or can't, or isn't, and I've still succeeded. So, you know, it kind of, if I can, you can, you know?
Yeah. Rosie, where would you put this? Where would you think is the best life advice you could give out?
So my advice would be, put your hand up, ask for help.
Yeah.
Because you will always get it.
Yeah. Cheska, I know you took yourself out of a situation. Do you feel that's probably the look after yourself, basically?
Yeah, it saved me. I think don't be afraid to make a change, and
I love that
however
advice.
scary it might seem, the unknown.
Yeah.
It could be the best thing you ever do.
Right. Yeah. Trisha.
It's weird. My bullying dad taught me two things: never let the bully see you cry, and fight back. And I never thought I would believe in that. But one thing's wrong: never let the bully see you cry. I believe in showing your true emotions, and I've done that, and it's worked for me. So I went against that. However, fight back recently when they said, "Oh, you used your cancer in your dancing on ice skate," and I got I got bullied because I wanted to do my last skate as a tribute. I wanted to do that skate to other fellow breast cancer survivors. And you know what? I said, yeah, you're right, you lot, all the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
You're right, I did use my breast cancer. I used it to inform women to check themselves. I used it to inform people you can survive. So,
Emily, what's your advice?
It might not always be possible to do, but try and not become friends with your bully, but kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
I like to believe in the good in everyone, and so if you know,
As hard
a
as it might
person who
be.
I've encountered before, you know, who's bullied me, I actually just felt nothing but sympathy towards her.
And what happened with that
Emotional
relationship?
Well, I walked away from it. but I walked away with sympathy for her because she'd clearly got an awful lot of things going on in her life.
Right.
And actually, the senior person to me who also left the workplace that we were both in being bullied, she said to me, look at what's going on in her home life and look what's happened.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so I just felt sympathy.
Yeah. Paola, what's your takeaway?
I have two big advice for everyone and also for myself always. Love yourself more and fight back.
Yeah.
This is my way to live. And
What kind of way can we all learn to love ourselves more? It's hard.
yeah, maybe for me it's easy because it's quite natural. But I think you just have to look at yourself in the mirror every morning and think about the beautiful and positive things you have.
You've got going on.
Instead of thinking about the negative ones.
Yeah.
So you should be grateful for that, and you should just smile at life and understand that it's really short. We could die tomorrow, so we should just enjoy it.
Someone once said to me, write down 10 positive things. When you're going through this in your head, take a piece of paper, write down 10 positive things. It could be from when you were 4 years old to your current day, and just 10 things, and read them and read them and read them. And then the next day, do it again. Until you're lifting yourself up.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Well, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming, the panelists, my co-host Michael Evans, our director Rosie.